I first wanted to thank Jonathan again for the opportunity for us all to be here. I know it's been extremely helpful for me to sit and listen to the different perspectives from people who I deal with both at the West Virginia legislature and also on the other side of the V. You've heard my introduction. My name is Danielle Waltz. I'm a member at Jackson Kelley, and I practice in both the public policy group, and I also do some consumer litigation, construction litigation. So I see a lot of people in this room in a number of different capacities. One of the things before I get into the Telephone Consumer Credit Protection Act that I think that I heard today a lot was people want clarity in the law. And Troy Driatris said, you know, right now we're in a position where we feel like the West Virginia statute has a lot of clarity. And why is that good? Well, it's good for people representing plaintiffs and consumers because they could give them guidance on when somebody violated the act. And vice versa, it's good for me because I can tell my client how to comply with the act and avoid liability. And I think a lot of us in this room on a number of the different statutory revisions work to get to that place because that's good for everybody. And when you're looking at the Telephone Consumer Credit Protection Act, it is not in that place. And because of that, I think there is a big lack of clarity for consumers. And there's a big lack of clarity for businesses, and some of which may not be doing the right things, but some of which who are doing the right things are getting wrapped up in these lawsuits. Before I get started, and I will try to be quick because I know I'm standing between you all and an open bar. My summer associates are here from Jackson Kelley back, and namely want to thank Jim McGibbon because he helped me put this presentation together. So if you like it, please tell Jim that he did a nice job. Jim also was funny enough to come up with this picture. I'm not that funny, so I was hoping there'd be some music in the background, but there isn't. But part of the problem under the Telephone Consumer Protection Act is this idea of, you know, did you give consent to call and have you revoked that consent? And so that's this call me maybe portion. What is it? You all can read these slides because I think that the slides really run through a lot of the basics, but because we are limited in time, I really wanted to focus on some things that are going on right now. And one of them, in 2015, the FCC, who has rulemaking authority relating to this, put out a directive regarding when someone provides consent, and also put out a directive as far as if someone changes their phone number where there's a safe harbor and on a number of different issues. And recently, the DC Circuit overruled a lot of that order and gave some direction on how the FCC should proceed. The Ninth Circuit doesn't necessarily agree with what the DC Circuit said, but the FCC hasn't done anything yet. And so you have this overruling this commentary overruling that order, and then you have an FCC who hasn't done anything relating to it. And more recently, one of the commissioners was out giving a speech, and he gave the speech to the American Collection Association, who was on the other side challenging that order. And you hear the commissioner give this commentary, the longer we wait to take necessary action, the greater the harms are that are inflicted on both organizations and consumers. And yet we're still in the same position we are. And when you think about the FCC, which is a governmental agency, I see things sometimes through a political lens, and I think it's partially because of what I do for a living. If you have a new president elected, you have an FCC saying what they're saying right now, and if you change administrations, you may have an FCC saying something different. And again, back to the problem with the TCPA, and some people in this room may disagree with me on this, but you can't really provide great guidance to your clients, especially I think on my side of the V. I have a client in West Virginia, and Mr. Sheridan probably can attest to this in the back as I've told him this. I said, do not use anything that resembles an auto dialer in West Virginia. Please don't use them, just don't do it. Because you're going to have problems, and so we gave them that, and they aren't using it. And that really seems to be the best advice I think I can offer somebody right now to be in full compliance with the act. move through a little bit. This is, and Jonathan, I think, is probably, again, his name's come up a lot today because his firm handles a number of very significant cases in this field. What is an automatic telephone dialing system? And why does that matter? Because right now, 80% of people have a cellular phone. Now, when this was enacted in 1991, totally different situation. And so many people demand communication on their cell phone or expect that communication on their cell phone or put their cell phone in places online where they've consented in some respects to have someone call them, but then are upset. I get upset. Who wants to receive robocalls about their car warranty, about a car they don't own anymore? Nobody does. But people do put their cell phone out there into the world for a whole host of things now. And that's different today than it was when the statute was enacted and when some of the changes have been made. And it's going to continue to be different. And there are a number of groups right now that are seeking exemptions from the FCC that are trying to communicate to people on their cell phone about things that they consider to be run-of-the-mill business issues or important issues. For example, your car's been recalled. Can you communicate that to somebody on their cellular phone? Credit union may want to communicate normal course of business items to one of their customers. Can they do that? And so the Association of Credit Unions is seeking an exemption right now from the FCC. A group of car manufacturers are also seeking a similar exemption. Of course, they haven't addressed that yet. That's sort of where we are. What's interesting about that is that on April 26th, there was a decision out of the Fourth Circuit. And that decision deals with the challenge. It was a First Amendment challenge to the TCPA. And the First Amendment challenge was related to a government-backed debt exemption. And the decision found that that exemption was unconstitutional as content-based speech, just a restriction on content-based speech. But they saved the rest of the statute. And so the court didn't get to that issue. But because of how it ruled, it left open a couple things. First, it only addressed a facial challenge, meaning that the TCPA defendants can still attack the statute on an as-applied basis. And second, the court did not address the argument that the FCC's regulations also were unconstitutional. And so here you have a number of groups going to the FCC that are saying, hey, I want an exemption and here's why. And then you have this Fourth Circuit decision that's out there that says there's some constitutional problems with limiting speech this way. And so that's just one of many issues that there couldn't possibly be enough time for me to address. And the same thing with this one. I think there's a question as to whether smartphones qualify here or not. I think there are a number of different people in this room that would argue either side of that. But until the FCC provides some direction, and then whether that direction upholds constitutional muster, I mean, those are things that are out there right now. And so I think I'd say, you know, stay tuned. And I think the FCC is probably going to be putting out some information relatively soon as a result of the DC court's directive. And then there'll be a lot of litigation surrounding what they put out there. But this is a very unclear area of law, I think, until Congress probably revisits that. So everybody knows how well Congress operates. And so when that happens, I don't know when that will happen or if it could happen, probably not right now. So stay tuned. I'm happy to answer any questions, although I suspect everybody would love to go to the bar. Thanks for listening to me.